Hello and welcome to my easy to understand guide to the GCSE Media Studies set text of Quality Street. So if you are studying the Eduqas exam board, you hopefully will have come across this text already, and this video is going to be a comprehensive guide of everything that you need to make sure you understand before you sit your GCSE exam in relation to this particular set text. The Quality Street set text will only appear in Component 1, Section A of your GCSE Media Studies exam. That means that you can only get a media language question or a representation question. If you get a media language question about Quality Street, it will be a stepped question, normally with several parts or bullet points to it, that ask you to examine or analyse at least probably 3 parts of the advert. And what I am going to do on the following parts of this video is go through all the different things that perhaps might come up in that media language section or question. So for media language on your screen at the moment, what you will do is you'll be able to see a whole list of the things that you're going to need to know and understand for Quality Street. Feel free to pause on the video at this point to make sure that you've scanned through this list properly and see whether or not you understand these words and whether there's anything jumping out at you in terms of you not understanding. I'm going to try and cover a little bit of everything in the video, but it's worth, if there's something you haven't covered in lessons or that you don't understand, just checking with your teacher or asking them to go over it again if possible, or doing some of your own revision in your own time. Okay, so one of the first things you're going to need to know with regards to Quality Street is about the word conventions and what conventions you might expect from a print advert, and whether or not Quality Street uses these conventions or perhaps doesn't use them or challenges the conventions in some way. Typical features of printed adverts include things like a main image, perhaps images of characters or people using the product that they're trying to sell, maybe the slogan and the product name. Sometimes the company name appears as well, depending on if the company is famous or not. You often get some brief information about the product, even if it's just telling you, I don't know, what it smells like, if it's a perfume, or what its unique selling point is, something that makes it special or different to other products. And often the name of the product or the logo for the product is placed in the bottom right-hand corner of the advert, because that is where our eye is and going to end up as we scan through a print advert. If you have a look at the Quality Street advert, you will see it's got a lot of these conventions. So there are images on the advert, there are pictures of people choosing the sweets, eating the sweets, enjoying them. You have the product name in the bottom right-hand corner. There is some information about the product as well. There's a slogan, what a delicious dilemma. So it has a lot of conventions of typical print adverts, but there are things that it does that is perhaps a little unconventional, particularly if you look at it in comparison to modern day adverts. So for example, modern day adverts very rarely feature this illustrated style. This illustrated style is almost like a painted picture, and you very rarely see that on modern adverts. But it was very conventional for the time period that this advert was released, which is in the 1950s. If you have a look at other adverts from the 1950s, you will see that a lot of them were illustrated in some way. And this is just part and parcel of the time period. It was what was fashionable. Obviously, there were no computers, no Photoshop at the time. So perhaps the illustrated style ties in with the limited technology that was available in the 1950s. So you could say that the style of the advert reflects its historical context. That's the time period a product was made in. There's also quite a lot of descriptive information on the advert. If you look at the bottom, there's quite a lot of small print. Now, adverts sometimes do include small print now, but it tends to be terms and conditions and things that we don't really need to read. Whereas the small print that is on this advert is quite descriptive information about the product and quite a lot of detail talking about the flavours and the ingredients, which you really wouldn't find on a modern day advert, particularly those for food products. Now, one of the reasons that they might have done this is because it was very conventional in the 1950s. Again, it reflects that historical context, and it also reflects perhaps the idea that in the 1950s, Chocolates and ingredients like toffees and strawberries may have been seen as luxury items at the time, and don't forget, in the 1950s they were still only just coming out of a post-war period of rationing, and so including references to all this detailed description about food would have been quite appealing to people in the 1950s who would have seen these ingredients as quite luxurious. There's also quite a lot of white space on the advert as well. So we don't often see this kind of white space on modern day adverts. But again, perhaps it's quite conventional of older fashioned adverts, and it does help to draw our eye and focus our eye on the items that are at the bottom, the important information. Something that you're going to hopefully become familiar with over the GCSE course is the idea of denotation and connotation. Now, denotation, I like to call this say what you see. So denotation is literally describing, D for describe, D for denotation. You're describing exactly what you can see. And connotation, you're talking about the kind of meaning or what it suggests or signifies. These are all quite good keywords to throw in to media written work. So to give you some examples from Quality Street, we can talk about what the image denotes and what those things connote as well. So for example, the image denotes a gold frame on a wall. Okay, so I'm literally saying what I see. The gold frame connotes wealth and luxury. So gold is something that we associate with wealth and luxury. So the connotes part is talking about what it means or signifies. And you can carry on with this and you can analyse in this way a whole range of elements on the advert, and you should practice doing this before the exam. So for example, the image denotes very bright colours and high key lighting, that is bright lighting. And these bright colours and the high key lighting connote positivity and fun. We'd often think of bright colours as being fun, exciting, engaging, and high key lighting as well as being something quite positive and kind of friendly. As well as being able to look at visual elements like images and colours, you're going to need to be able to look at design elements like font. So for example, if we wanted to have a look at the font on this advert, sometimes font people find very hard to talk about. So for example, on the Quality Street advert, we can talk about the use of serif font. Now, serif and sans serif are two good words or phrases that you might want to make sure you know for the GCSE exam. I'd love to tell you exactly what they mean in terms of language, but the way I explain it to my students is that serif, I always think of as meaning kind of fancy, having little fancy edges, whether that's kind of curls or twirls or little flicky bits. So serif is the kind of font that has little fancy edges. And sans serif, sans is French, which means without. So a sans serif font is without the fancy bits, without any edges or curly bits. So a sans serif font is something that is very, very simple and has very little in terms of embellishments, whereas a serif font can have quirky little edges, corners, curly bits, etc. So if you have a look at the bottom right of the Quality Street advert, you will see that there is font there that we would consider to be a serif font. There are quirky little curly edges on the Macintosh font. The Quality Street font, although it is quite simplistic, there are some kind of flicks to the lettering, and even on the What a Delicious Dilemma and the rest of the writing, it does have some serif edging to it. Now, serif font is normally used to signify that something is quite classy, quite luxurious, quite fancy. So you will see it a lot on adverts for products where they're trying to make the product look really great. So perhaps that's why that's been used. The font for the actual logo, Macintosh's Quality Street, is a consistent font in relation to all the other Quality Street adverts that had been out at the time. So whilst you, as a media student, might not recognise it, certainly audiences of the time would have been more likely to have recognised that font and style of writing. And so this could have been seen as an intertextual reference to older Quality Street adverts, and it may have been used to create a kind of consistent branding between all their different adverts that had been out previously. Being able to analyse Other aspects of wording in GCSE is really important. So if you have a look at some of the other words that have been used on the Quality Street advert, you will see that, one of the main things is that if you use the word Macintoshes, now Macintosh is a kind of name, like a surname. So it kind of connotes or signifies that this product, Quality Street, might be a family business. Perhaps it adds this element of tradition. Macintoshes sounds kind of Scottish, British, so it adds that element perhaps that this product might have been made within Britain, and that might make people want to buy it as well. You could look at the use of the alliteration in the slogan, the fact that it says delightfully different. Any alliteration is a good way of making your product seem memorable, and it also emphasises the different part. It emphasises the variety of chocolates that are going to be on offer in the tin. Not only does it emphasise the fact that there's going to be a lot of variety in the sweets, but it also could be seen as a kind of double entendre, like something with two meanings. Perhaps he's also got the dilemma of choosing between the two women as well. And that might be something that could connote that the product, the Quality Streets, are going to make you as the man more attractive to people if you buy these chocolates. The layout and the composition or positioning of the advert and the elements within it is something that a lot of students find it quite hard to talk about. So I'm just going to go through a few ideas for Quality Street of things that you could say if you get asked about layout in some way. So, for example, the fact that the gold frame on the wall is directly positioned behind the man's head has been done for a reason. Not only does it make him the centre of attention, so it makes him seem quite powerful, but it also feels a little bit like a gold halo behind him. It makes him look like an angel almost, or godlike, because you've kind of got this gold frame coming from behind his head. And that's all to do with the positioning of that frame. The positioning of the sweets in the bottom left-hand corner overlap the image slightly, and the reason behind that is most likely to make sure that as the audience read the advert or look down the image, the use of that sweet just draws their eye down to the bottom of the advert, making sure that they read all the way down into the description. So it's a good way of linking the image at the top with the text at the bottom. You could also talk about the positioning of the tin. Okay, so he's holding the tin in his lap, and you've got the layout, the positioning of the women either side with their hands going towards the tin. Now, it's quite a suggestive position for a tin and the women's hands as well. And you could say that it maybe makes the product seem quite seductive, quite attractive, as though it's literally attracting the women to him. Now, something called intertextuality could come up in a number of different topics for the GCSE and even the A-level exam as well. And it's important that you do understand what intertextuality is. The word inter means kind of between, and text we talk of being different media texts or different media products like adverts or films. So the idea is intertextuality is anything that makes a reference between different media products. Perhaps where you're watching a film and you see something and it makes you think of another film or TV program or a magazine, etc. So what you need to be able to do is with Quality Street, think of it from the perspective of both as a modern audience, but also in particular as that 1950s audience who would have been looking at it at the time and going, would they have seen this advert and be reminded of any other adverts or any other media products? And first of all, the thing you want to look at is the two characters in the frame at the top of the advert. Okay, the characters, if you don't know who they are kind of brand mascots, if you like. They appeared in almost every Quality Street advert for a number of decades. They would have been quite familiar to people who had seen Quality Street adverts before. They do have names. The lady in purple is called Miss Sweetsley, and the man in the kind of red and black soldier's outfit is called Major Quality. And I suppose the idea is that they normally appeared in a Quality Street advert, often in a frame or a mirror or a painting of some kind, as though they were kind of coming alive and looking down at the chocolates with desire and excitement. And so they would have been an intertextual reference. They would have been something where audiences may have seen them and immediately gone, oh, I recognise them from other Quality Street adverts. We've already mentioned about how the brand logo itself is very much something that would have been familiar to audiences as well, because of the design and the font that's been used. But actually the advert as a whole, the entire design, layout and style, is very much almost an intertextual reference to previous Quality Street adverts. Here are just a few examples of other Quality Street adverts from the 1950s, and you will see they're all virtually identical, normally featuring a couple of some kind eating the chocolates, often featuring Major Quality and Miss Sweetly in some kind of painting or frame or mirror. And then normally you get pictures of 2 or 3 sweets at the bottom, along with a slogan and the brand name or logo in the bottom right. So the advert as a whole could be seen as one giant intertextual reference to previous adverts for Quality Street, perhaps making the audience feel like this is a familiar and traditional brand and product that they can be comfortable with. Something else that you might need to be aware of for the Quality Street advert are elements of narrative. Now, it's quite hard to look at narrative when we look at print adverts, because we often think of it as being about a story in a film or a TV program or a book, but actually you can see some elements of narrative within the advert. For example, it's quite clear that the man is eating chocolates with the women and that they want the chocolates, and the people above him are really interested in the chocolates as well. So there is some kind of element of narrative to what they've put within the advert itself. But there are some narrative techniques and theories that you might want to be aware of, because they are set theorists and set ideas at GCSE which might be useful. So for example, it might be useful to be aware of Vladimir Prop's narrative character theory, which is that there are typical characters that appear in most narratives. It's quite an easy theory. There's a whole video about it on my YouTube channel, so check that video out if you want to get some more information about Prop's theory. But being able to recognise that perhaps the man in this advert has been shown as your kind of typical hero might be useful. The gold halo of the mirror or the frame of the painting above his head, the fact that all of the people are pointing towards him, the fact that he's sat in the middle of the advert with the tin and that everyone seems to be clamouring after him, his suit, his tie, all of this makes him seem like your typical kind of Propian hero. And perhaps you could say that the women either side seem a lot weaker. Maybe they're almost like the damsels in distress, you know, wanting the chocolates that he's got, needing the hero to kind of look after them and provide for them. So being able to look at theories and apply them to print adverts is quite important. Also, it might be useful to know about the idea of enigma codes. So this is a theory by Barth or Barthez, and there's also a video about this on my YouTube channel as well. But basically, enigma codes are anything that is mysterious, unanswered questions where the audience don't know the answers, but that whole process makes them feel more engaged. So looking at the Quality Street advert, you want to see if there is anything enigmatic or mysterious that might engage the audience. For example, looking at the top of the advert, the audience might be asking themselves, why are these people looking out of a painting? Have they come alive? What are they looking at? And then as you move down the picture, the audience might be asking themselves, what is the man choosing from? What is his delicious dilemma? What chocolates will he and the other people choose? So enigmatic elements are an important part of creating an exciting narrative. So that is a summary of the media language that you might need to know for Quality Street. Please be aware that you could also get asked a representation question for Quality Street, in which case please check out my other video about Quality Street where I go through everything you need to know for representation.